In this video, we're going to be doing another sketchbook art piece. I'm calling it Bookshelf, and it's pretty much for beginner artists. I myself consider myself as a hobby artist, and I'm just sharing my journey about learning to do art with you. So I'm starting off here. I've actually got some watercolor paper. It's about an A5. It's from Strathmore. I'll put the details below, and I'm just drawing lightly in pencil to start us off with our 3 shelves that we're going to be putting our books on. So there's no real rule about where to put your shelves or how high or separate the shelves have to be, but it's just a guide because we're going to be placing books in an assortment of ways onto these shelves. So what I'm doing here now is I'm drawing a couple of books just vertically that's like standing on the shelves, and then I'm also going to be drawing a couple of books horizontally across on the shelves. It really doesn't matter how you lay your books out. It's just an interesting way to create some sketch art. The idea of a sketch art page is that you, with the sketch journaling, that you're going to say, choose one day in your life and maybe create it as a memory book. We're going to put the date on. We're probably going to put the temperature on as well. And any thoughts or gratitudes that I want to add to it later when I've finished, there will be space left in amongst the shelves for me to write some notes for my actual sketch journal. So I'm continuing on there. I've got a kind of one of those plants. I think it's called the biggest aspidistra in the world. It's one of those plants on that top shelf. And I'm actually just adding a little clock in there. And I'm just going to speed it up a little bit from now. So I'm continuing on drawing books on my shelves. I'm using a 2H pencil there. I'm just doing a bit of, it doesn't have to be exact. I'm just drawing my books in the kind of shapes that I think books are, and making sure to leave some space between the shelves so I can do a little bit of writing. I do find that sketch journaling is very interesting because you can leave space within your life to talk about the things that are important in your day. So I'm really what I'm calling a hobby artist. When I was younger, I used to do art as a kid and at school and so on. And then as in the grown years, I just never picked up a pen or anything of the sort. And it was only towards the end of 2020, as we were in lockdown, when I started to do a little bit of daily drawing and did some artist trading cards, which I'll talk about in another video. And I started to work on that. And what I found was that in December 2020, I actually received some watercolor paints for the very first time that I'd ever owned a paint box. And I can just, let me just step back a bit. In the October I actually went to what they called an art retreat. It was an art workshop here in Vancouver at the Luminous Elephant, which I highly recommend. And we had a full day of art there, all suitably spaced out with social distancing. And we did a watercolor, we did an acrylic painting, we did some lino cutting, we created a beautiful wreath out of current foliage, what do they call it, daily foliage, and there was another, oh yes, and we also made a little terrarium. So there were 5 activities there, but the 2 that stood out most for me was the watercolor painting, which I'd never done ever, and the acrylic painting, which was kind of interesting too. So there was about 8 of us in the class, and we all managed to get these artworks finished. But I was enamored then with watercolor painting. I wasn't that keen on the acrylic because it was quite messy, and I wasn't quite sure how biodegradable acrylic paints were, and I'm still looking into that, and maybe if you know more about it you can let me know in the comments. So I decided to start thinking about doing watercolors. I had, towards the end of last year, also picked up some pencil crayons, and I started off with what the kids had left behind in the house, and then I started going out buying 1 or 2 of the Faber-Castell Polychromos, and they're the crayons I use as well in this drawing. And I just bought them one at a time. I didn't buy a set of colours because I really wanted all the greens, because I do like to do botanicals and plant drawings and leaves and nature and things like that. So I did pick up quite a selection of the greens to start with. And this is how I then got into it. And then when I received the watercolors at Christmas time in January, which was so recently, I just started painting with watercolor. And I'm finding I'm really enjoying it. And what I want to say to you is that if you are someone who thinks you might be an artist, but you think you can't draw, you can't paint, go out, get yourself a paint box and just start as I did. I'm not formally trained. I've never had any training at all in art, but I just like doing simple drawings. I like doing such as these sketch diagrams that I'm doing now. And I'm just, as an overview, I'm just going back in now with the pen to pen over my ink, my pencil drawings, and I'm going over with the actual pen, so then I will erase the pencil marks later. And I just like to do simple, I want to say small drawings. I do like artist trading cards, the 2" by 3" drawings, and I like these small ones. I think it's almost an A5 page. This is watercolor paper I'm using here, and they fit in my little journals. I like the Moleskine and the Locaterm journals. But what I'm saying is that when I started my sketchbook, I bought a sketchbook and I didn't know where to start. I had a blank page staring at me. And then I started drawing separate pages, such as this one, where I've got the page separately. And then if I really like it at the end, which I tend to do anyway, I then will glue it into my sketchbook. And you'll see towards the end of the video, that's exactly what I do. So my sketchbook isn't particularly messy. It's more organized because that's the way I like it. I don't like the mess of art that art can be at times. So I find that if I just do a little drawing like this, a small drawing that will take me probably maybe 2 hours from start to finish, I can create these little sketch drawings in one day and finish them off and then glue them into my sketchbook. But what I want to say is that if you feel that you can't draw, or you're not a good artist, or you aren't trained, or who gives you permission to even do art, then let me tell you, I'm giving you permission. Go and do art. Start drawing right now, today, in your sketchbook. Get yourself some organized there with some paper and some pens, and just start drawing. It doesn't have to be complicated. You know, we're probably never going to be super duper artists, but the benefits you receive from actually through the self-care process of doing art, I believe, are immeasurable. And this is what I'm finding now doing these small sketch journal pages. So just to get back to the actual drawing, what I'm doing is I'm going over with a Pigma Micron it's a pen, it's a 0.1 millimeter pen nib, and I'm just going over the drawings, the lines that I did for the books, all pretty straightforward on the bookcase. So there's 3 shelves that are drawn across the page, and then I add a couple of books, some on the side. I added a little plant, I added a little clock, and on the bottom shelf in the middle, I have an open book standing like on an easel, and that I'm going to put as the book that I'm actually reading at the moment. Because this is a sketch journal page, I will leave space to put the date, and it's going to be on one of the little picture frames, and I'm also going to put the temperature, which will go on the other little picture frame, because it's actually snowing here in Vancouver today, so it's pretty darn cold. And I will note that in. So this page will have the date on, it will have the temperature, and I do have space below the last shelf to write some gratitude notes. And that's really what's going to come and be part of this sketch journal page. So it's like a diary entry, and I usually do, or so far this year, I've done like one every 2 weeks. And I just put the date on, and maybe it's the 1st of February, and this then will be the 14th of February actually, and that will be the date that goes on this page. So it's not something that you would do as a sketch journal, I don't think, every single day, or I don't find I really have the time to do it, but I do find that every 2 weeks or so, I'm able to get out my pens, get out my pencils, and create some sketch journaling. So I think that sketch journaling is different to art journaling. With art journaling, you're tending to paint a picture in your page, and then a lot of people will come along with collage, stickers, and embellishments, pockets, and what have you, to create this piece of art. So it ends up being a mixed media piece of artwork, and that to me would be art journaling. Whereas, to my mind, sketch journaling is much like this, where you're doing a pencil sketch to start with. You then go over with your pen and keep it simple, and then, as you see later, we're going to go over with some paint and crayon and what have you. So to my mind, sketch journaling is, I want to say, less messy. It's easier to get going to start with, and it's something I would recommend you start with prior to doing art journaling. This is a very simple one. I'm calling it Bookshelf, and it starts off with 3 shelves across the page, and on those shelves I'm just drawing a few books, and I'm going to write some bits of information about my day. It's pretty straightforward. It's not, you don't have to be super clever to draw square rectangular books on a shelf. You put 3 together standing up, 3 together lying down, as you will see. And if you actually join my mailing list, when I create a video, I send out a mailing list, and I usually have a blog post to go with this as well on my website. And attached to the email will be the actual a PDF download of this pen and ink drawing that you can then download and print out at home on your printer. It's a US letter size, and you can then color it in if you want to. But it will be a good guide for you if you're just starting out with sketch journaling, or you're into books or bookshelves in any way. This would be an ideal way for you to get going. I just want to inspire and encourage everyone who has literally shelved art because life got in the way. Perhaps you got married, perhaps you had kids, mortgage, you got to go to work, all of the things that take up so much of our energy, that if you are at all interested in pursuing an artistic and a creative expression, that you should just start right now. And this would be a very simple way to get going with some art drawings that would make sense to you. If you happen to be a reader, and hopefully you are, you will then be able to write in that 3rd shelf down on the middle book, on the little easel, the name of the book that you're reading, because we're going to put the date on here, and we're going to say, well, during February, which is when I'm recording this, I was reading, and it's actually the Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. It's a book I've been reading for quite a while, but that's the one that is still on my nightstand, and I am still reading it. I wouldn't say I'm a voracious reader. I don't read a lot, and I don't really read novels, but I do enjoy having a book, and I may read it once and then I may read it twice. So I wouldn't say I have a lot of books on my bookshelf, but I do have books on the go at all times. And perhaps over the course of a year, I may read 12 or 15 books. So it's probably just on one a month at this stage. Now here you can see I'm going in with my white plastic eraser, and I am gently erasing the pencil marks and leaving behind the ink marks. So I'm taking it easy. I'm trying, and I'm holding down the paper so it doesn't wrinkle as well. So I want to lift up all the pencil marks, because once you put the watercolor paint on, you can't lift the pencil marks. So we're leaving behind the pen lines, which you can see. And I'm using there a dry paintbrush just to brush all those little erasing darknesses off the desk onto the floor. I never use my hand to wipe erasings off, because if your palm's a bit sweaty, you can smear dirty smudge marks all across your work. So you want to be going in lightly with your white plastic eraser and then dusting off the erasings. I'll speed it up there, and then when I've finished doing all the erasings, I'm then ready. I've got the ink on the page. I will then be ready to start with the watercolor paint. The watercolor paints I have here are the Sakura Koi watercolor paints, and this is the Pocket Field sketchbox. I will put a link below the video if you're interested in picking up these paints. These are great. I received them from my son-in-law over Christmas times, so that's great. It's pretty much a brand new box. And what I'm doing here is I'm picking up a limited color palette, and that means I'm only going to be using a certain bunch of colors within this painting, and I'm going to be using the reds, oranges and browns, as you'll see, mainly on this painting. So I like to have two jars of water there. There's one for clean water and one for not so clean water, and you always want to have clean water on your brush when you start, and you're pulling paint onto your palette, mixing. So then with quite a loaded brush, quite wet, I'm going in with a sort of tawny colour, orangey browny, that I've mixed up from 2 colours within the paint box, and I'm just washing and washing over the actual background. So it's a bit loose. It doesn't have to be exact. I'm not going exactly up to the lines, but I'm just giving a colour wash to the background above the top shelf. Now I'm just picking up the pace a bit as I continue on. And when I do the wall behind the next shelf down, I pick up more of the red and I'm adding it to the colour that I've already got mixed. So we've got the same tones of colours coming through, or should I say the same, I'm using the same colour, but I'm just adding a little bit more red. So I'm using the same mix on my palette all the time, just adding more colour to it as I go below the first shelf, just above the second shelf. And again, I'm just whizzing around there, just filling in the background. It really is quite interesting how you can work with colours, and you can just start off with a lighter colour, add a few different colours to the one colour in your mix, and that helps you stay on track with the tones within a painting. So this is what I said of going for the reds, the oranges and the brown tones within this whole painting. Again there, I'm just picking up some more brown and going in there. And really the paper's starting to curl a little bit. I could have taped it down more. It is watercolor paper I'm using, but that is just the nature of watercolor paper. And I'm just washing there right at the bottom. Now that bit below the lower shelf is where I'm going to do some writing. So that will just be a straightforward wash. There's not that much drawn there as well. Because you need to have room. This is where I'm going to write my gratitude, what I'm grateful for. And really, again, you have to keep it simple. Now the paint has actually dried thoroughly, and I actually straightened the paper a bit and stuck it down a little further now. So it's thoroughly dried, and what I'm going to do now is come in with some of my crayons. I do have those reds, pinks and yellows picked out there, and some greys for shade, of course. And I'm going to start colouring in specific parts of the drawing, just lightly at first. I start with the lightest colour, so I'm going to go in there with the I think it's called Chromium Yellow, that one, and I'm just highlighting a couple of books here and there within the shelves. Each of the books will end up being a different colour, but you want to build up your colour in layers. You're not just going to lay down a yellow book. I will be adding other colours to that in the future. And I'll just speed it up a little bit there, and you'll see that I'm going over randomly, working from the top of the drawing down towards the bottom, going in and picking up some of the yellow detail. Next I'm picking up an orange, that is the slightly darker shade. And I'm going to go in and just pick up some other books and give a light colouring to certain books here. It really is pretty random. The fact that I did this in the reds, browns and yellows tones is just one of those things, because to me books always seem to look, old books particularly, are those kind of brown, faded looking colours. But as you'll see later on, I will bring in some others, some greens as well. So we're just going for, you could have done this colour palette in blues or greys or something like that, or lilacs and greens. It really doesn't matter, but I find that when you do work with a limited colour palette and you focus in and around on one of the primary colours, which are red, yellow or blue, you actually use colours that are close to that. The whole image at the end looks quite organised and contained. It looks more composed, and rather than saying, oh, I'll have a purple book, I'll have a green book, I'll have a blue book. When you keep randomly dipping into your colours and your colour palette or your paint box, it actually adds irritation to the drawing. So if you want to start simply, just use one or two colours and shades up and down from those two colours. Then I'm coming along with this is what I'm calling a salmon pink. It's going through, and I'm picking up each of my groups of 3 books. I'm just going to colour one in that salmon, and I'm going to just add a little bit of shading just on the one side. In this drawing, I'm assuming the light sources from the top right shining down, so the shadows will be on the left and below, and that's where I'm adding the actual shadows for these books. I think it's interesting too that some people don't want to do art because they say, oh, I haven't got the equipment, I need to go and buy a $60 paint box, or I need to get a $50 bunch of crayons. And you don't really. You can look around your home and you can start. There's bound to be some crayons somewhere. If you've got kids, there certainly will be. And all you're doing is actually starting to express yourself through colour, and you can do this with a limited palette. So even if you said, I can only find a red and an orange colour, that will not stop you. You need to, not that I'm telling you what to do, but the idea is to begin, start today and start doing some art. Here I've got a richer carmine coming in, and I'm just picking up some more details on the books as we go across. it's really pretty straightforward. And I think when you watch these time-lapse arts, you can see what people have done. And I want to encourage you to do it yourself. I want to, as I said, give you permission. Just start. Don't let people put you off. Don't let your partner or your mother-in-law or somebody like that say, oh, you're not an artist. Why are you wasting your time? That's what children do. I totally disagree. I think to have a creative life where you can express yourself and through art and particularly through colour is good for the soul. I think it's a way to have something for yourself as well. That's the benefit of having a sketchbook where you can close it and take it with you. That it's for you. It's never going to be on an exhibition anywhere. No one's going to be looking at it. No one's going to be criticising your work except yourself. So do be aware of those voices in your head that would maybe stop you from doing art, when really I think everyone has art within them. We are creative beings. We are humans. We have created magnificent things in this world, and we have got these brains to do it with. And certainly, if you feel the urge to, the fact that you're even watching this video, if you have the urge to do some creative work with colour as well, then I think you should start. And you can let me know how you feel about that. It's that if people do put you off, if you had an art teacher back in the 5th grade who said, that's a load of rubbish, you can't draw, and you've got these words in your head, and these are negative dialogues within your head that are saying to you, oh yeah, no, Mr. Jones says I can't draw, and that was 30 years ago, therefore I can't draw because he must be right. And it's absolutely not true. I encourage you to pick up a pencil today and start drawing, and I would certainly love to hear what you're doing about that. I'm coming in here now with a light green to do that plant. I think it's, as I say, the greatest aspidistra in the world, which is actually a joke. But I've got the 2 greens I'm using in this palette. So there's the mid green, and then I have a more olive green, which are 2 great colours. You never really want to have emerald green going. It's just too bright. So do be careful when using greens. You want the muted grey greens almost. I'm also taking that particular exact same green, because remember, I'm building up my colours from light to dark, and I'm going in on some of the shadowing on some of the red books, because when you put green and red together, they are opposite colours. You will tend to get brown. It's one of those things. But this is a more interesting combination. I never want to use, I actually don't have a brown crayon in my crayon set, because I would rather mix it, because I can do a red and a green and come up with a brown, because they are opposite on the colour wheel. And each one will be different. Each of the books that was red, and I'm now going over with a green, will tend to be a different tawny brown, maybe a chestnut brown, and then a chocolate brown. So you do get these different variations of browns, rather than picking up a mid brown from your pencil case. So I would urge you perhaps not to even use browns, rather mix the colours you want from the main colours that you're using. And again, I'm just working from the top down, going over with the green where I feel that we could add some colour there, and I'm still going to build up more colours on these books, as you will see. Now here I'm picking up the darker, it's actually this is the dark olive green colour, and this is to add shade below the leaves. So I'm only colouring almost below the leaves where shadow would come in that olive colour, to just add more definition to those 4 leaves in that kind of droopy looking plant there on the top shelf. I'm not sure if the plant like that would even survive on a very high top shelf. It clearly would need a lot more light than is getting stuck on that top shelf on my bookshelf. I live in an apartment, and all my plants have to stand at the window because it's just too dark in the back recesses for plants to grow effectively. And of course you want to give them the best chance you have. I sometimes wonder if it wouldn't be easier just to give up with real plants and just get the fake ones, because psychologically seeing the greenery within your home actually makes you feel good anyway, and whether or not it's a real plant doesn't seem to make much difference to the upliftment you get when you have greenery around you. And I am recording this during February 2021, so we have gone through almost now 12 months of lockdown, and a lot of people are at home and turning to creative endeavours to keep busy. So I think you can only watch so much Netflix, and then you have to make something interesting. So I do like to do these one-page drawings. As I say, I can normally do them within, say, a day for sure, and generally about 2 hours once I get the paint dry. But I just enjoy making this creative imaginary bookshelf that I would maybe one day have in my home. I don't have a bookshelf like this. It's all drawn from imagination. And because the structure of the page is so simple, 3 shelves in the middle and splitting it into quarters, it's so easy just to then start to just tinker along and add more colours, add more shades to the books and what it is you want to put on your sketch journal. I think the business of documenting your day is very interesting. It's not that you want to write down, well, I don't write down what I had for lunch and what I had for breakfast and those kind of details, but I do like to consider how was the week, how did I feel this week, what was I doing, and in this case, what book was I reading? I will probably be still reading this book in 3 weeks' time, so I'll have to do a different type of sketch journal about some other type of indoor room, which I do like to do on shelves. I think shelves work well. It gives you a structure to the basic drawing. It lets you as a beginner go in and create something pretty straightforward. I then have, as you can see there, I'm now using a mid-grey to put a little bit of shade on, that's on the picture frame. That's where I'm going to write the date in the end. That's why that picture frame is more horizontal. And then I have the other picture frame in the middle there where I'm going to put the temperature because it's actually snowing and this is something that really doesn't happen often in Vancouver. I'm putting a little bit of light grey just over the clock because technically the clock would actually be wooden, but I don't really want it to dominate over the books. I think the main features in this drawing are actually these books on the shelves. And the idea is that you would look at this and think, well, what is written in these books? What books is this person reading? Are they recipe books? Are they adventure stories? Or are they how-to books? Or who knows what? You don't know what people have got on their shelves, and everyone will have a different selection of books. And when you look at it, you can imagine, I wonder if is that a gardening book she's got there? I wonder what's in there. Or are these some classic stories? Or maybe some Greek stories, or one of the really old books that you're reading. And this is the idea of with doing a drawing, that we can see the plant's the plant, but in the books are contained adventures, stories that can take you out of yourself and fuel your imagination about what books are likely to be on those shelves. If you've got any ideas about what book titles these books could be, certainly let's hear it in the comments as well. I do have a gold crayon here, which I kind of like. It adds a little bit of bling to the shade of colouring in. It's not a colour I will lay down in a big way, but I do like to use it to bring a bit of highlight to some of the actual features when I do my sketch journaling. I find it's a light gold. It just adds a little bit of a sheen, a little bit of a shimmer, and it can pick up and bring forward more details about the drawing. So now we've finished basically really with the coloured crayons, and I'm actually going in now with a thicker pen. So this is a Faber-Castell Pitt Artist pen, but it could be any black pen. But this is a 0.3 millimeter. It's slightly thicker than the one I used to start with, which was a 0.1 millimeter. So I'm just going to go in and redefine the black lines that have now actually been slightly coloured over by the paint and the colouring. And I do this to bring focus to the actual objects now on the shelf. The idea being that you can see it more clearly. It is, after all, a sketch journal, and these tend to start with a line drawing because that's what a sketch is. You start with your pencil and you're sketching out something, and of course you could leave it at the pencil, or you could take it to the next step where you put on the first wave of pen over, your thin pen over, and then you actually come in with the wash. Sorry about the unfocus there. You actually come in then with the paint wash, and then you come over with the crayoning and going forward. And because the page is actually curling still a little bit, I'm having to use my finger there just to hold it down to make sure that I'm doing the ink overlay where it's supposed to go. Because this is watercolor paper, it's quite rippled. It's got quite a lot of tooth, which means it's quite a rough-ish page. It's not a super smooth page. So it does tend to hammer your pens a little bit, and to get in every nook and cranny with your pen, sometimes you have to go over once or twice over the same line, just to make sure you're picking up the correct definition you need. So over time, the pens do tend to wear out, but I just keep going till they're absolutely dead as a doornail. I certainly don't toss away a pen or use a new pen each time. I just go for it, because here I am trying to create something beautiful, and that's what we're going for here. So this is the actual book that I'm reading. It's there parked on a little easel, and I'll write the title on it at the end when I'm doing the writing. So I'll just finish off there with all the pen overlay. Now I'm using a gold gel pen. You can really get them anywhere, and I'm just putting a little bit of highlight on some of the top bits and bobs. You know, some of the old books may have a little bit of gold leaf down the side, or there's maybe a bit of a glimmer on the top of the leaf. Certainly on the clock face, that might be a brass face, and I'm just picking up some highlights there in the gold just to add a little bit of interest to the drawing. I always like to add a little bit of gold. I have gold pens, gel pens, and I also have a little watercolor gold pot, which I had to get separately. Now I'm coming in writing the date there, February the 14th, 2021. In that one photograph, I've put the 1 degree and snow in the top one, so I know what day it is, what I'm talking about, because this is my sketch journal. Here I'm writing the title of the book, The Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. That's the book I'm reading, as I said earlier, and I'm just highlighting it so I can remember when I look back to say, oh yeah, I read that book in February. And maybe I'm still reading it in June, but I started reading it in February, so that's kind of interesting there. Just bring a little bit of highlights. That's the writing that I'm bringing now to this particular drawing. Writing a couple of notes now on that little back wall there, saying, enjoying daily art practice, that's me, and loving limited palettes, because that's really what I was trying to do with the reds and the browns and the yellows with this drawing. So that's the limited palette that I'm using there. I'm just writing that on the back so that I can look back and remember. It's like a memory book of what you were doing. I'm then moving down to the special place below the bottom shelf where I put some gratitude comments, and I'm saying there, grateful for my family, my health, good food to eat, and being able to be creative with art at home. And those are what I'm grateful for today. So that's what I've added to this page. Of course, you can add anything else, whatever's important to you in your life, what you're grateful for, and it can be the simple things, and very often that's what makes life worth living as well. So we really are now at the end of our sketch journaling page for today. What I'm going to do now is actually put it into my sketchbook. This is a sketchbook, and I'm just going to trim down the page, because if I'd have realized when I started, it's actually about 5 millimeters too long. So I'm cutting off about 3 millimeters off the bottom, just to make sure that it's actually going to fit into the page, and I will, yeah, and it's still not going to fit. So I take 3 millimeters again off the top, and still, yet this thing is too long. If I'd have realized this, I'd have cut it before I started. So I just give it a final trim. So now it fits neatly in the page. It's slightly narrower than the actual page, so it will turn, and you want to get the edge towards the outer edge, not the gutter edge. I'm coming along with my good old Amazon Basics glue stick, which is, gosh, cheap and cheerful to say the least, and I will stick this down. Even though this page is still curling, I will make sure I glue it down for sure. And then once it's, you can see there that it actually does lift, it fits there as part of the actual sketchbook. So here's a look at the final drawing, as it's already glued in my sketchbook. This is the drawing that we did today. It really was a lot of fun. It probably took me about 2.5 hours all told, and it gets to then be glued into my sketchbook as part of my sketch journaling, which I really enjoy. I really enjoyed doing this, and I hope you did too. So I'm Alison Hazel Art. This is my channel. We do colouring pages, sketch and art journaling, pen and ink, and a little bit of watercolour. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.